Hi, I'm Ajit Lenin. Welcome to the Enterprise Architecture video series part 9. The last few weeks, we have been looking at the six-layer framework I introduced towards establishing enterprise architecture practices. And last couple of weeks, we've been looking at the architecture domains layer, and within that, the business architecture, right? And last week, we looked at business process. Under the business architecture, we looked at business process component. And in this video, we look at the business function and capability, right? So last week, we touched upon the business function a little bit, but today we'll go a little bit deep into the business function and how it relates to business capabilities, right? So to start with some of the key characteristics of business function, right? Business function, to define it, is either a single step or a set of steps performed by a single actor that contributes towards achieving the goal of a business process, right? So it is part of a business process. I mean, it can be part of a business process, but it is a single step or a set of steps which is atomic, right? So the key feature of business function is it has to be atomic, even though it may include multiple steps to finish that business function. Each of these steps goes through only transitionary states, right? So it cannot exist in that transitionary state. So it has to be, the business function as a whole has to be atomic. So when we say atomic, what does that mean, right? So that basically means that the business function cannot be stopped in between, right? It has to be reverted back and started again, right? We cannot do a pause and a resume kind of a scenario when you do a business function, right? Business function can be performed across different processes, so it's a reusable entity, right? So it can be reused across multiple business processes. Business function cannot exist by itself. So business function as a component can exist on the architecture perspective, but on a runtime environment, business function cannot exist by itself. It has to be part of one or more business processes to invoke the business function, right? Business function can be a manually performed one, or it could be an automatic one, right? And business function, as I said, it can be, so because it is atomic, it cannot be assigned or reassigned. I mean, it can only be reassigned or reassigned. It cannot be transferred in between, right? So I can, if I assign a particular business function, a business function is taken up by an actor, right? It has to be either completely done by that actor or reassigned to another actor and to be able to be completed fully, right? We cannot have one actor complete a couple of steps and then transfer it to another actor to complete the next step. So that basically means that if we end up being a scenario like that, that we are not really looking at a business function, we are looking at a business process, right? So that's another way we can identify whether we have to model a particular entity component as a business function or a business process. Right? So now let's look at business capability, right? What does it mean by business capability? So business capability is an abstraction of a business function. So how do I say that, right? So for example, I'm approving a request. Approving a request is a business capability that is realized by could be an approving, it could be a hardware request, it could be a facilities request, it could be an HR request, it could be whatever it is, right? So each of these business function, we can actually abstract it into an approving a request, right? So how does it help, right? So abstracting the business capability from the functions enhances reusability, right? This is where we will be able to identify the reusable components of the enterprise itself, right? So that's why we need to abstract business functions. Otherwise, we'll be implementing business function across processes and duplicating the capabilities, right? So we need to abstract them to be able to identify the reusable components, which is the business capability, right? And similarly, a single business function can realize more than one capability. For example, I need to, for reserving an appointment, I may have to search for an open slot and then reserve that appointment. So there are two capabilities, right? The search is a capability, reservation is a capability, right? So both are combined and realized by a single business function, but there are two separate reusable business capabilities in there, right? And it is not mandatory that all business function has to be abstracted, but it would be helpful to abstract the business function into capability wherever possible so that we can build this, bring in the reusability aspect. And sometimes the business scenarios where business function and business capability are synonymous, right? So if I take in a telecom world, order validation, right? Whenever we submit a order, we validate the order. That is a business function, but it's a capability also, right? There's no, it's very hard to abstract that into a higher level reusable component, right? Identifying the business capability helps in deriving the corresponding IT capability. So this is where we need to, another level of abstraction that would help us in the architecture, in the enterprise architecture perspective is, once we identify the business capabilities, we should be further identify the IT capabilities that will realize that business capability, right? So there are three levels. Now we are looking at three levels, right? We have business function, we have business capability, and we have IT capability, right? So two levels of abstractions, right? So that enhances our reusability aspect, right? So we'll quickly look at what is the relationship between a business capability and IT capability, right? So IT capability can be derived in two ways, right? So it could be either an aggregation of a set of business capabilities, or it's an abstraction of a set of business capabilities. So when I say aggregation, so let's take an example, right? I have, say, for example, I'm raising a request or approving a request can be aggregated. So these are part of a workflow, right? So all these steps can be aggregated into a workflow management as an IT capability, right? Similarly, rating. So when you take a billing scenario, right? Rating a voice, telecom billing scenario, rating voice usage, rating data usage are two separate business capabilities which can be actually abstracted into a rating as an IT capability, right? So there are ways we can derive IT capability as an abstraction of the business capabilities, or it could be an aggregation, right? I can put multiple business capabilities together and identify an IT capability that could realize that, right? So again, why do we need to identify IT capability try to derive IT capability from business capability? It basically, again, reusability and brings in agility and more cost efficiency. IT capability helps in building the application architecture. So this is where we'll see it more when we get into the application architecture piece. But from the business, this is how we can link business architecture into an application architecture, right? So once we identify the IT capabilities, we can identify what application is going to implement that IT capability, right? So there could be IT capabilities which could be derived out of different business processes, different business functions, different business services as such, but all could be abstracted into a specific IT capability, which could be a common application or a common platform that could implement it, right? Though it is part of different business processes, right? Identify IT capabilities basically improves the configurability of that application. And basically, we can build low-code platforms, helps us in building low-code platforms. Right? Let's look at a couple of examples. So we briefly looked at all these aspects. Let's look at an example how it works out, right? So in this example, we have a quoting process and a fulfillment process, right? The quoting process involves estimating the effort of the maybe the work involved. It may be, say, it's a sow, right? So we do an estimate of the sow. We determine the price based on the estimate. We generate the code, and someone approves the code, right? And in the fulfillment process, we analyze the task. What are the tasks involved? We assign the task to the respective folks who want to do it. Whoever is assigned completes the task, and the task somebody reviews and approves the task, right? So if you really look at it, all these business functions, so determine price or let's say determine price. So it could be basically it can be abstracted into two business capabilities. It is reviewing a document, which is an estimate generated, or it could be can be extracted with performing a task, right? Somebody is just doing a task of determining the price, right? Or if you take a generate code, right? So it could be, and again, a general perform task. When we look at approve code, right? Approvals and approving a document as a business capability, right? Similarly, on the other side, when the fulfillment process, you have complete task, you have approved task. So there also you have an approved task, right? So here there's an approved document, there is an approved task. So if you look at it, so in this particular example, I have 5 different business capabilities identified. This is just representational, right? So review document, approve document, perform task, assign task, approve task are different business capabilities, which comes out of the abstracted out of the business functions. So I can aggregate all this together to say that, oh, basically we need a workflow management tool, right? So all steps are part of the workflow management capability. If you really look at as an IT capability, we need to build a workflow management tool, right? So this is where when we build an enterprise architecture or start building the architecture, we could put all these pieces together. We start from the top. We identify the business processes, which boils down to the business function. From there, we can abstract the business function. And from there, we are deriving the IT capability, right? So this drives our application architecture. So another example to look at is a shopping. So maybe we can take a telecom example. Say somebody is coming and shopping for a broadband service, right? So they can browse a product, compare products, a couple of products, take a price, check the price, and add to the cart, right? Similarly, after they order, once they are ready to use, they can configure the product, right? They can go through a router configuration page, look at the features available, select which feature they want to change, specify the parameters, and save changes, right? So these are all the business functions involved. Now, let's look at some of these key business functions, right? So browsing a product is basically we are searching and browsing, right? Two business capabilities. Comparing the products, we are comparing between two products, right? And when it comes to configure products, again, we are browsing, right? So there is a search feature and the browse feature as a business function. Now, when we look at it, there are commonalities across, right? So I can abstract all this and say that, okay, I need to have a reference data, right? I need to have a place where I need to keep these products or features as a reference data. I need to have capabilities to search. I need to have capability to browse. I need to have the capability to compare, right? So all this comes into a general IT capability or abstracted into a general IT capability of product catalog. So that's we basically coming to the conclusion that from this business architecture, we are coming to the conclusion that we need an IT capability called product catalog. So we need to build a platform that supports product catalog, right? So these are a couple of examples. Now let's look at some of the relationships a business function entity component has, right? So business function can be extended or specialized through inheritance. Business function uses business entities, so it can use any number of business entities, but it can create or modify only one, right? It can sometimes some business function doesn't even touch any business entities, but if at all, it needs to touch only, create or modify only one business entities. Beyond that, that means we need to split it into multiple functions. Business process is performed by a role, so it could be n number of people who could perform the role, but on a runtime, it can be acted only by one person, right? Business function composes business processes, meaning it can be part of any number of business processes, right? One or more business, it needs at least one business process to map. Otherwise, the business function is a zombie, right? There's a typo here. So business function also creates the event, right? And business function can generate an event that can trigger other processes, etc. Right? So definitely, we would like to limit ourselves saying the business function should create only one event because we are pretty much looking at an atomic activity, right? So it should generate only one event. Moving further down, so based on those relationships, this is a meta model for the business function. So business function realizes a business capability, and it can be part of business process, part of one or more business processes. It uses multiple business entities, but creates or modifies one. A number of roles can perform that business function, but on a runtime perspective, only one actor can perform that business function. And similarly, business function can trigger one event. I mean, it need not triggering an event, but on a max, it can only trigger one event. Like beyond that, if it is creating multiple events, then we need to look at how do we split that business function. So that basically means if it can trigger multiple events, means it not really atomic, right? And to summarize what we have discussed so far, so we looked at the key characteristics of the business function. We looked at what business capability is, and then how do we map business capability to IT capability. We looked at business function relationships, and then finally business function meta model. And the next video, we'll look at the business entity in detail. Thank you.